I always wanted my pictures to have a certain kind of ambiance, a certain kind of feel. Spielberg and Lynch and Hitchcock, what they all share is a certain kind of theatricality. I've always been influenced by a variety of artists that I would say come out of a particularly American tradition. Painters like Edward Hopper and writers like Raymond Carver, and so I sort of feel like I'm part of that tradition in one way or another. That sensation of looking at something that's both familiar and mysterious at the same time. So that's the association I hope to get in almost, or in all of my pictures really. Something that feels ordinary, yet is like tinged with this sort of a certain kind of beauty and terror. There should be no motivation, no literal plot line. It's just the moment of the picture.
Gregory Crutzen, self-defined American realist landscape photographer, is one of the best-known and influential fine art photographers working today. He is currently the director of the photography department at Yale University, where he received his MFA early on. His work is internationally recognized as singularly unique for the lighting technique, which he creates with the help of a very large photo crews. His most recent series is titled Cathedral of the Pines, which was recently exhibited at the Gagosian Gallery in New York City.
Really embraced different levels of production. So in the beginning, it was you working alone, and more recently, you've taken on crews and had to pull permits to close streets and all these things that I don't think people normally associate with photography. They associate it with cinematography. But what struck me about that was that it was very similar to what architects do. We ultimately have to go out in the world, explore a site, come up with a vision, and bring that to fruition through collaboration.
No matter what level of production, I feel like I do have a singular story to tell in visual form. I've always been interested in using light and color to tell that story. At its height, Beneath the Roses, there were 100 people involved in that body of work from beginning to end. I do think the struggle is, in the end, is to try to find this, almost despite the enormous production, to have, in the end, a singular voice.
His work has been influenced by 20th century melodramas and literature, especially Hitchcock and Ralph Waldo Emerson. They drove Crutzen to challenge the essence of light and force him to evolve in a new direction. Hitchcock and Emerson developed a new challenge for Crutzen by changing language to visuals in a most effective way. Crutzen's photographs are dramatic, cinematic, and always thick with tension. They show often disturbing, surreal events, usually taking place in small American towns. His photographs are elaborately staged and lit using crews familiar with motion picture production and lighting large scenes using motion picture film equipment and techniques.
The interiors that you generated struck me when I started to look at details, how there really is no contemporary in the work at all. The phones are rotary dial or they're push button, or it can't be pegged at a time.
I do not, as you say, want any indicators of contemporary life. I want everything in the picture to feel ordinary and familiar, but outside of time.
But is that a kind of liberating element for you, for imagining the scene? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's certainly not like a period piece.
Right.
You know? So I'm not referring to, let's say, Mad Men, particular time period. The best way I can describe it, it feels like nondescript. So I want all the spaces, all the objects in the space, all my subjects and the clothes they wear, and the cars and the houses, all to feel ordinary but aged down and slightly musty. So there's nothing. It all feels kind of like it's been there. It's going to sort of stay in that kind of circumstance.
These domestic scenes are set designed with extreme attention to detail. Light is used to tell a story about the enigmatic figures featured, blurring a thin line between reality and fiction, creating a mix between formal photography and experimentation with an eerie perspective of life and death within a traditional suburbia setting, focusing on how the photo is taken rather than just fixating on the subject.